So we're going to break down these 8 cycles of a harvest. The 8 cycles of a harvest. Once again, there's 4 phases and there's 8 cycles. So you got parallel cycles and then you have vertical cycles. Parallel, vertical. Jacob's ladder was the vertical cycle. We call that the lay up cycle. The vertical. I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob thy father. That is a vertical. You saw the angels going up and down the ladder. That is a vertical cycle. We call that the lay up cycle. Okay? This is the harvest. The angels were coming down with empty baskets, harvesting, and then going up with full baskets, laying up their treasures in heaven, the storehouses in heaven. And they would come back down with an empty basket because they've given it to the Father. It was similar to the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, the feeding the 5,000. He lifted the basket up, boom. We call that the layup cycle. And then when he came down and he distributed it, they emptied the baskets. You lay it up, boom, to get blessed. Then you break it once it's blessed. And you distribute it. You distribute the blessing. All right? It's 8 cycles. You got the layup cycle. Then you got the lay-ish cycle. Okay? He said, I will put enmity between your seed and the serpent seed, right? I will put separation, far as the east is from the west. And so that's a lay-ish cycle. So Adam and Eve wasn't kicked out of the garden. God said, I got to curse the ground where Cain killed Abel. So he said, I'm going to curse this ground, but Adam already blessed you and bless the works of your hand. So you got to go to other land that is not cursed. Because this ground, I'm going to put an angel with a flaming sword to make sure Cain can't go into no other land. God cursed the land and then put an angel. That was the very first prison. Adam and Eve wasn't in the prison. Adam and Eve still had their blessing, but they had to go outside of the ground that was cursed, or they could have stayed there the whole time and tried to farm in that land. But because God said it was cursed because of the blood of Abel, nobody could bring forth fruit out of that land. So they moved. We call that a layish cycle. When God judges somebody, let's take Lot and his family. God was judging Sodom. And he came to judge Sodom, but he came to tell Lot and his wife and his daughters, listen, I'm going to put enmity between you and those who I'm judging. And you can go parallel from here and remain blessed. And that's what Lot and his daughters did. A layish cycle. Same thing with Noah and his sons and their wives. God said, I'm about to destroy the whole world by flood. Create an ark, and you will go parallel on the waters of the same flood that's going to destroy them in this ark. It's called a layish cycle. All right? 8 phases to a harvest. All of the individuals that I'm talking about, Job, Noah, King David. These are all individuals that God said, yo, I got specific land for you. Leave where you're at and go to the land, and I'm going to bless you in that land. That's a layish cycle. And then he says, Jacob, the heritage of Jacob is, if you love me, feed my sheep. Well done, my good and faithful servant. The way that you lay up treasures in heaven, the way you have pressed down, shaken together, running over, is better to give than to receive. It's a lay up cycle. So those who don't concern with yourself and do the good Samaritan blessing of those who are left for dead in the highways and the byways. He says that's a layup cycle. You've laid up your treasures in heaven. And he said, for those of you, I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob thy father, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. All right, so we're going to get into 8 phases of a harvest. 8 phases. So that's 16 different ways to have abundant life. 8 layish cycle phases or parallel phases to separate you from those who are being judged. And then 8 layup cycle phases to lay up your treasures in heaven. All right, here they go. First, harvest. A harvest is a crop. It's the labor in picking the crop. That's the first cycle, the harvest cycle. You have to physically do labor intensive, and you have to do a fruit inspection. That's the most important thing. You can't give any type of fruit to the master. You have to inspect the fruit, and you have to give perfect, unblemished fruit in the basket in your harvest. That's the first thing. Second cycle is processing. Once you harvest it, then you have to process it, because you have many different sizes and you want to put them in a different category. So you have to begin to take whatever you're harvesting, whether it's the grape, whether it's the olive, whether it's the coffee, whether it's cocoa bean, whatever you're processing, whatever you've harvested, now you have to process it. Number 2 is processing, the processing cycle. Number 3 is the drying cycle. Once you harvest it, part of the processing is cleansing. Anytime you're dealing with what you're giving to God, you have to clean it. You have to wash it. You have to wash it. And God's 2 witnesses are the water and fire. His 2 witnesses, his 2 judges, water and fire. He drowned the world by flood, and then he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah by fire. So after you wash it, then you got to dry it. He said, I wish that you were hot or cold. The flames of Sodom and Gomorrah and the water that washed away Cain in the flood. He said, I wish that you hated what I hated. I wish that you loved what I loved. But since you won't do either, you lukewarm. You neither hot nor cold, so you worthless to me. Because I can't use you as an instrument of judgment. I can't clean nothing. And I can't burn nothing down. You're worthless to me. So, drying represents the heat to pull the moisture out once it's clean. Because you don't want the fruit to spoil and rot or mildew because of you leave the moisture in it. So you got to dry it. Milling, that's where you size and sort. That's where you put different value. It's just like gemstones. You don't just sell all gemstones at the same price. Because if one is 2 carat, one is 24 carat, you're not going to sell the 2 carat for the 24 carat. That just makes sense. Milling means sorting so that you can put value on it based off of its size. Milling is sorting. Then you want to export. Then you want to export it. See, because now you in the wholesale, you in the warehouse, but you can't make any money. The whole purpose of a harvest is to be fruitful. And you always want to have an exchange. It's a waste if you have a harvest and you don't exchange goods for currency. So you have your warehouse where you're processing, but then you want to export it to your retail operation. You go from warehouse or wholesale, and you're internally exporting it to the retail side so that you can now exchange it with the public. The public doesn't come to your warehouse. The public doesn't come to your wholesale. There's no way to exchange or make any money or whatever. So you internally export it so that you can exchange it with the public. So you have a nice retail store, you have a nice mall, you have a nice something. So you internally export it so that now you can display it, so that now you can price it, so that now you can put a sale on it, so that now you can market it and advertise it, so that now you can do a promotion and you can do product placement and you can showcase and you can do all of these things. You have to export it from the wholesale processing to the retail. Then once you get it to the retail, it's in wholesale big batches. Now you got to break it down. You got to break it down from the wholesale, the bulk, down to the individual, right? In the coffee bean, you may call this cycle roasting. So when you prepare to roast it, you're going to take the big sacks and you're going to put them in individual coffee bags or coffee cans to sell to the public so that they can roast it, right? So as you have your people break down the whole coffee bean and prepare it to be roasted, and they probably take those beans through the roasting process because they've been packaged, they've been dried, but you gotta cook it, you gotta heat it. So they roast the whole coffee bean. And after they roast the whole coffee bean, then they grind it. The seventh phase is grinding. The sixth phase was they roast it. It's in the back of the retail operation now. First, they're gonna roast it, put it back in the heat, put the heat back on it, turn up the flame 7 times hotter is what they said for the 3 Hebrew boys. Roast it. It's still a whole bean. After they roast it, they're gonna grind it because now it's ready to be sold. They're gonna grind it, portion it out, put it in its package it up. They grind it, package it up, sell it. The exchange for the money is exchanged on day 7, on cycle 7. Once it's grinded and packaged it, the grinding phase in day 7 is equal to the wedding feast. The grinding phase, day 7, wedding feast. And day 8, the 8th phase, now that somebody has made an exchange, they've put a value on this product. So now it's their turn. So the person who processed it, they got what they wanted. They got the money. And now the consumer gets to consume it. The consumer doesn't want to have to go and do all of the work. They want to drink the coffee, but they don't want to do the work to do all of that. So there is a business person that goes into business and says, listen, me and my family, we'll do the process to bring it to market so that you can enjoy just sitting at home drinking a brew. And so that is their reward, and that has a monetary value. They are willing to pay X amount, and the business person is willing to go through all of the phases to receive an X dollar amount. And they both agree that the price of the exchange is worth, the business agrees that the price of the exchange is worth everything that they went through to bring it to market. And then the customer agrees that the price that they pay is worth them not having to do the work to enjoy the brew. And what we're going to teach you is there is laws in the United States against something called peonage. And what you are going to learn from us that you're not going to learn anywhere else is that those that violated God's laws in the East, who then wanted to re-violate God's law by coming and taking these lands, they were so unsuccessful that it was so easy for us to come into the lands that God gave us because we're blessed. And all we had to do to take all of their workers is come and put our business cycle in place right next to their slumlord slave trade forts. The narrative that they told you in the United States of slavery, it never happened here. Never happened. It never happened here. The story of slavery that you know happened in England, happened in France, happened in Germany, happened in Spain, happened in North Africa, happened in West Africa, East Africa, South Africa, happened in India and Asia. From 300 AD, Emperor Constantine, to present day. Well, the Bible says, we're going to cut that time short, 1798. Daniel and Revelation. From 311 AD, the Romans, the Greeks and the Romans, in Europe and Africa and everywhere, enslaved everybody because God had cursed them because they would not be obedient. And they still haven't stopped being disobedient, so they're still under the curses. But in 1798, God cut them off, just like he cut off the Hebrews, just like he cut off the Egyptians, just like he cut off the Babylonians. And then God said, my faithful children, prepare to go to the wedding feast. So when they tried to come into these lands and start the curses all over in the new lands, all we had to do was set up shop, and everybody who they brought with them from the old lands, who were slaves in their old lands, they left them and they got an inheritance with us. And so if you were foolish, if your family was foolish to be already here in 1798 and in the 1800s and the 1900s, if your family was foolish enough to let them come here and put a little fort, in New Jersey they put a fort called Fort Dix. All over the country they would come and they would put these forts to try and protect themselves because they were alien invaders of the land. And all we would do is go and burn them out. They might be here for a while, but what they were doing was, while they were here, they are pirates. They were raiding and plundering the land, and then they would go back to their worthless lands with new inventions, the wheel, the wagon, rifles, clothes. They would sail here, they would set up a fort, they would plunder and raid. They're pirates, they're Vikings. Then they would go back home. They never had a system of slavery here. The system of slavery was always in the East. And then after 1871, Isaiah 19 commands us, you will rebuild the old waste places in the East. So the majority of our kings and queens that prevented the Europeans and the Africans and the Asians and all of them from coming over here, we then went back to rebuild Assyria, to rebuild Cush, to rebuild Diluvian, the Diluvian capital of Eden, the Diluvian Garden of Eden. We went and began rebuilding the kingdom of Ham. Isaiah 19. And so that's when all of the Europeans and the Africans, when we invaded that land, they left those lands. And that's when they all came over here and they started telling people this is the land of the free and the home of the not so. Because now it's Judgment Day. We're home, we're coming back home. So we've rebuilt. The greatest of the kings of the East came out of the East to Mary and Joseph with gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The greatest of the kings of the East came with the wealth and the riches of the East. And we went back and we rebuilt that. Now we're coming back and we're the greatest of the kings of the West. We're coming back home to do layup cycles, to have a heavenly brew at the wedding feast of the bridegroom, of the Lion King bridegroom and the lioness bride in heaven. The final wedding feast, where each one of these 8 phases we're presenting to the Queen of Queens sitting on the throne, a lioness Queen of Queens called the Holy Spirit sitting on the throne, the bride right now. It is finished. It is done. And if y'all want to be a part, if y'all want to be coached on how to get your inheritance back, on how to cleanse your sanctuary, heal your land, claim your 50th birthright to the tree of life on your 50th birthright day, your first fruit blessings, your Feast of Tabernacles, your wedding Feast of Tabernacles, annually. He said every year, annually. We in the upper room right now. We're going to come out of the upper room. This is the upper room right now. June 18th. June 18th. Is the identical day where they came out of the upper room. June 18th, 2024 is the day this year. This is what the Son of God said, this do in remembrance of me. Because you can't prepare for a wedding feast if you're not preparing on earth every year for the wedding feast. It ain't had nothing to do with communion. Y'all all confused. And I'm going to show y'all that all of these religious systems are following the oldest idol worship ever in the world. God showed it to Ezekiel. Ezekiel saw a wheel in the middle of the wheel. This is the pagan wheel of the pagan calendar of the year. And I'm going to show y'all that your pagan calendar, all of your unholy days, all of your national unholy days are the same violations that Sodom, that Egypt, that Babylon did, and more importantly, Cain and the flood did, which caused God to judge them with death. Yes. No, it's the other one. It's only 2 left in the other one. I'm going to show y'all. God showed Ezekiel a wheel. I put it on my arm. And I told my whole senior class in high school, Pine Forge Academy, that when these events start taking place, I'm going to do exactly what I'm doing here today. I'm going to come forward and I'm going to tell y'all, I already told y'all senior year that these events are going to happen. And then I'm going to come back and then y'all still going to fall for it. Y'all still going to fall for it. Y'all still going to be deceived. Y'all still going to be following. And then I'm going to show up and I'm going to remind y'all that I told y'all that this was going to happen. And I put it on my arm. That Easter, and he took Ezekiel, when he showed Ezekiel the wheel, he took Ezekiel through almost 40 chapters and he showed them and he called out the pagan calendar and the pagan gods that they worship, Molech, and he told you that they had stars for each one of these gods. They had symbols. A different type of star when they worshiped these devils. Sacrificing your kids to the flame in Molech. Asherah poles, he all through and everything that y'all do. Easter, Halloween, Christmas. They're all there in Ezekiel. These are the 10 tribes of Israel that God destroyed and wiped out totally with the Assyrians. After he sent Ezekiel to them, Ezekiel was warning them, you are worshiping Satan in God's temple. And God don't acknowledge none of your worship, none of your offerings, none of nothing. Every last one of y'all gonna be destroyed if you don't cleanse your sanctuary and heal the land. Every last one of you will be destroyed. Not one of the 10 tribes did it because they had turned themselves over totally to Sodom and Gomorrah, the priesthood of Sodom and Gomorrah. And God showed Ezekiel the pagan wheel. And this pagan wheel, the Vatican has made it its courtyard. It's the same pagan wheel, St. Peter's Square. It's a wheel in the middle of St. Peter's Square with an Egyptian penis or Egyptian statue coming up in the middle of it. Molech, Osiris. This is Pharaoh. All of you have been deceived into worshiping the gods of Egypt. The Roman Catholic Church, just like Caesar and the pagan Roman Church that killed the Son of God, Pontius Pilate, represented Caesar, and Herod and his wife represented Abraham's children, the king of Judah, in Jerusalem. Church and state. The Satanic Church and the Satanic State. Abraham's children and the Greeks and the Romans. Same thing you have right here. And they're all black. All of them were black. Herod was black. Abraham's seed was black. The Greeks and the Romans were black. And you have the same thing today. The whole world is following these black Greeks. Look at your black Greek fraternities. The United Negro College Fund and the HSBCUs. They're filled with black Greeks worshiping the same gods. Washington, D.C. They pull from all of these black Greek fraternities. Barack and Michelle Obama. They go down to Harvard. They join these black Greek sororities and fraternities to learn Satan's secrets, says Revelation. And then Washington, D.C. makes them a politician. Politician is polytricks or polyprostitutes. Poly is short for Polyphemus. Polyphemus is a god, a Greek god. So when they say politician, polytricks or treats, polyprostitution. That's why the kingdom of Greece is extinct right now. They're polyprostitution to Satan. That's why the Roman Republic We don't have a republic. We never had a republic. You don't have a constitution. We have a covenant with the Most High God. I will send my bride into a place prepared for her by God, out of the reach of the dragon. In 2,300 years, then the sanctuary, God has a covenant with us, a time prophecy, just as accurate as his Son of God being born, living, dying, raising, and then destroying Jerusalem in 70 AD. 490 years before. We have the same covenant with God that is a judgment on the wicked and a reward for us. There is no constitutions in there. There is no republic. There's no democracies. There's no USA. There's no, the US stands for Uncle Sandman. God said, build your house on the rock. Curse of those who build their house on the Uncle Sandman. Sandman is Apollo. Showtime at the Apollo. He was the #1 Roman god, Apollo. Black Greek god, Apollo. Showtime at the Apollo. There's nothing new under the sun. The same black Greeks is doing the same thing, and they always going to do the same thing. The same black Romans is doing the same thing. And we doing the same thing. We putting enmity between those who are blessed, us, and those who will be cursed. Now it's time for you to choose. If you want this, you got to give up everything. You got to start all over again. You got to repent, be born again. Turn from your wicked ways. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, repent and turn, hear from heaven, not hear from Barack Obama. We don't even talk about Donald Trump and them. They are imposters. Satan will impersonate an angel of light. The world is following